The string quartet was tuning their instruments in my living room while a private chef prepared the meal that would recreate our first date. 11 years of marriage, and I still love surprising her. Then my phone pinged with her location, not stuck in traffic or at the office, but at the Charles Hotel with someone else. One call, straight to voicemail. That night, I didn't just lose my wife. I uncovered a 6-month deception, so perfectly executed I never suspected a thing. Most men would confront her immediately, driven by rage and hurt. I chose patience instead. I hired someone to document every meeting, every lie, every secret rendezvous. By the time I finally made my move, I had built an airtight case that would leave them no escape. They thought they were clever. I was about to show them what clever really looked like. My name is Jonathan Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and for 11 years, I believed I had a solid marriage. Sophia and I met in our mid-20s, dated for 2 years, and tied the knot in what everyone called a dream wedding. We built a life together in suburban Boston, bought a house with a yard big enough for the kids we planned to have, and settled into what I thought was happiness. Sophia had always been the type who appreciated thoughtful gestures. Not expensive gifts, but things that showed I was paying attention. So for our anniversary, I wanted to create something special, something that would remind her of why we fell in love in the first place. I took the day off work without telling her. Sophia thought I was at a meeting across town, but instead, I was preparing a surprise that I had been planning for weeks. I hired a private chef to recreate the meal from our first date, the little Italian restaurant where I had nervously spilled wine on my shirt, and she had laughed in that way that made me fall for her instantly. I transformed our dining room with string lights that mimicked the stars on the night I proposed. I found photos from every year of our marriage and created a timeline around the room. I even managed to get a small orchestra quartet to wait nearby, ready to come play when she arrived home. Everything was perfect. I checked my watch, 6:15 p.m. Sophia usually got home by 6:30. I imagined her face when she walked through the door, the way her eyes would light up, how she would put her hands over her mouth in that gesture of surprise she always did. I had seen it so many times over the years, and it never failed to make my heart swell. But 6:30 came and went. Then 7 o'clock. Then 7:30. I wasn't worried initially. Traffic in Boston could be unpredictable. Meetings could run late. But as the chef gave me concerned looks and the quartet members shifted uncomfortably in the living room, I decided to check my phone. Sophia and I had shared our locations with each other years ago, just for safety. I rarely checked it, but now I opened the app. According to my phone, she wasn't stuck in traffic. She wasn't at her office. She was at the Charles Hotel in Cambridge. My first thought was innocent. Maybe a work function, a goodbye party for a colleague, something she had forgotten to mention. I sent her a text. Hey, everything okay? 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Sorry, babe, crazy day at work. Have to finish some reports. We'll be home late. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, a strange feeling creeping up my spine. She wasn't at work. She was at a hotel, and she was lying to me about it. I sat there in our dining room, surrounded by all the romantic decorations that now seemed to mock me. The chef gave me a sympathetic look as he packed up his equipment. The quartet had already left after I awkwardly explained the situation and paid them for their time. Something wasn't adding up. In 11 years of marriage, Sophia had never lied to me about her whereabouts. At least not that I knew of. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she really was at a work function at the hotel. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. The sinking sensation that told me something was wrong. I need to know. I muttered to myself, grabbing my car keys. The drive to Cambridge felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. By the time I parked near the Charles Hotel, my hands were shaking. I didn't have a plan. What was I going to do? March through the hotel looking for my wife. But as luck or fate would have it, I didn't need to go inside. As I approached the entrance, I saw them through the large windows of the hotel's upscale restaurant. Sophia sat at a corner table, leaning forward, her hand resting on the arm of a man I recognized immediately. Nicholas Taylor, her colleague, the one she had introduced to me at the company Christmas party last year as the new creative genius on her team. The way they were looking at each other wasn't professional. The way she laughed, touching her neck in that gesture I knew so well, wasn't the way you act with a coworker. And when he reached across to brush a strand of hair from her face, My stomach twisted into a knot. I stepped back, ducking behind a column. Part of me wanted to storm in there, to confront them both, to demand answers. But another part, a coldly rational part one didn't know existed within me, held me back. I needed more information. I needed to be sure. I pulled out my phone and called her. From my vantage point, I could see her glance at her phone on the table. She frowned slightly, then silenced it without picking up. She said something to Nicholas that made him laugh, and they both went back to their intimate conversation as if I hadn't called at all, as if I didn't exist. I felt numb as I took several photos with my phone. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and just sat there, staring at nothing. The drive home passed in a blur. I barely remembered navigating the streets, stopping at lights, parking in our driveway. Inside our house, the home we had built together, I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark dining room, surrounded by the remnants of my failed surprise. I needed to talk to someone. Someone who would understand, who would give me honest advice without judgment. I picked up my phone and called Thomas Riley, my best friend since college. If anyone would know what to do in this situation, it would be him. "Hey man, what's up?" Thomas answered, his voice cheerful. I need to talk." I managed, my voice unsteady. "Something's happened." Thomas must have heard the distress in my voice because his tone immediately changed. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I just saw Sophia with another man," I said, the words burning my throat as they came out. "At a hotel restaurant. She told me she was working late, but she's with this guy from her office, and it's not a business meeting, Tom." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Shit, John. Are you sure?" "I saw them with my own eyes. Took pictures." She ignored my call right in front of me. "Where are you now?" he asked. "At home, waiting for her to come back and lie to my face about where she's been." "Listen to me," Thomas said firmly. "Don't confront her yet. Not until you know exactly what you're dealing with. It might be more than just a one-time thing. You need to know the full picture before you make any moves." Thomas was right. I needed more information before confronting Sophia. But waiting for her to come home that night was one of the hardest things I've ever done. At 10:45 p.m., I heard her key in the door. I had cleaned up all evidence of the anniversary surprise, leaving just a single lamp on in the living room where I sat pretending to watch TV. "Hey," she said, setting down her purse. "Sorry I'm so late. The Anderson project deadline got moved up, and we all had to stay to rework the timeline." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for 11 years, and saw a stranger. The ease with which she lied terrified me. No hesitation, no telltale signs of deception, just a smooth, practiced excuse. "Did you eat?" I asked, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "Yeah, we ordered in." Another lie. "I'm exhausted. Going to take a shower." As she disappeared upstairs, I texted Thomas. She just got home. Lied about everything. Said she was at the office all night. His response came quickly. "You need a PI. I know a guy. Discreet, thorough. Let me set it up. A private investigator." It seemed so extreme, like something from a movie, not my life. But Thomas was right. If I confronted Sophia now, with only tonight's evidence, she could claim it was a one-time thing, a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. I needed to know the full truth. The next morning, Sophia acted completely normal. She kissed me goodbye like she always did, told me she loved me like she always did. I wondered if Nicholas had received the same kiss, the same words, just hours before. I met with the PI Thomas recommended that afternoon. Jack Donovan was a former police detective, now running his own investigation firm. He was straightforward and professional, showing none of the judgment or pity I had feared. "I'll need some basic information," he said, opening a notebook. "Your wife's schedule, her vehicle details, the name of this man you suspect, and any patterns you've noticed." I provided everything I could, including the photos I had taken at the hotel. "Most people who come to me already know the truth," Jack said, studying the pictures. "They just need confirmation." "Are you sure you want this confirmation, Mr. Mitchell? Because once you have it, you can't unknow it." I thought about our 11 years together, the life we had built, the future we had planned. "I need to know everything," I said finally, "no matter how painful." "I understand," Jack nodded. "I'll begin surveillance today. I'll document everything and report back to you in a week, sooner if I find something significant." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. The charade had begun. For the next week, I would live a double life, playing the role of unsuspecting husband while a stranger documented my wife's betrayal. Living with Sophia over the next week was like being in some twisted play where I had to perform the role of clueless husband. Every morning she'd kiss me goodbye. Every evening she'd tell me about her busy day at work. And twice more she texted that she'd be working late. Each lie cut deeper than the last. On Friday afternoon, Jack called. I have preliminary findings. Can you meet? An hour later, I sat in his office as he laid out photographs, receipts, and a detailed timeline. Your wife and Mr. Taylor have been meeting 3 times a week on average, Jack explained, his voice professionally detached. Mondays and Thursdays at the Charles Hotel, and Saturdays at his apartment in Back Bay. The photographs showed them entering and exiting the hotel together, holding hands in a park, kissing in his car. Each image was stamped with date and time. Irrefutable evidence of a relationship that went far beyond a casual affair. How long? I managed to ask. Jack hesitated. Based on my investigation, including interviews with hotel staff and doormen at his building, at least 6 months. Possibly longer. 6 months. Half a year of deception. While I was planning our future, Sophia was building a separate life with another man. There's more, Jack said, sliding over a folder. Mr. Taylor is married. I flipped through photos of Nicholas with another woman, entering a suburban home, playing with a young child in a backyard. His wife is named Rebecca. They have a 3-year-old daughter. From what I can tell, she has no idea about the affair. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Sophia betraying me, but they were both betraying another family. Another unsuspecting spouse sitting at home, trusting and blind, just like I had been. What now? I asked, feeling hollow. That depends on what you want, Jack replied. Most clients at this point either confront their spouse or speak with a lawyer. Sometimes both. I gathered the evidence, my mind already working through options. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. There was another innocent person involved. Another victim. I need time to think, I said finally. Can you keep this under surveillance for another week? Jack nodded. Of course, Mr. Mitchell. I should warn you, though, in my experience, the longer you wait to act, the harder it gets. As I drove home, his words echoed in my mind. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. But I needed a plan. I needed to be smart. And most importantly, I needed to take back control. Another weekend passed in the strange purgatory I now called life. Sophia claimed to have brunch with her girlfriends on Saturday. Jack's photos showed her entering Nicholas's apartment at 10 a.m. and leaving at 4 p.m. I smiled when she came home, asked how her friends were doing, and watched her create elaborate stories about their imaginary lives. By Monday, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Thomas. I need to talk. In person, I said. We met at a bar across town. I spread Jack photos on the table between us. Jesus, Thomas muttered, flipping through the evidence. 6 months, at least. And this guy's married, too. I nodded, nursing a whiskey I didn't really want. I don't know what to do, Tom. Every day this goes on, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Thomas leaned forward. You have 2 options. Confront her or leave her. Either way, you need to protect yourself first. What do you mean? I mean, you need to talk to a lawyer before you do anything else. Find out where you stand legally. The thought of divorce attorneys and court proceedings made my stomach turn, but I knew he was right. This wasn't going away. This wasn't fixable. There's something else, Thomas said carefully. Have you thought about telling Nicholas's wife? I had thought about little else since learning of her existence. Rebecca, with her 3-year-old daughter, living in blissful ignorance, just like I had been. Wouldn't that be vindictive? I asked. Thomas shook his head. It would be honest. She deserves to know, just like you deserve to know. Think about it. If someone had told you about this 6 months ago, wouldn't you have wanted to hear it? He was right. Again. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. Alan Rosenbaum had a reputation for being fair but thorough. Based on what you've told me, Alan said after I'd explained everything, and the evidence you've gathered, you're in a strong position. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but infidelity can still impact property division and alimony considerations. I left his office with a folder of information and a clearer plan. That evening, as Sophia texted that she'd be working late again, I made my decision. I would confront her, but only after I had everything in place. Only after I had taken back some measure of control. And I would find a way to tell Rebecca Taylor what her husband had been doing. Not for revenge, but because the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. Sometimes the hardest decisions are also the clearest ones. Over the next few days, I put my plan into action. First, I secured copies of all our financial records, bank statements, investment portfolios, property documents, anything that would give me a complete picture of our assets. Alan had emphasized the importance of financial transparency before any confrontation. People tend to hide assets when they see divorce on the horizon, he warned. Document everything now. I took a day off work while Sophia was at the office, or so she claimed, and combed through her home office. What I found surprised me. A separate credit card statement with charges for hotel rooms, expensive restaurants, and gifts I'd never received. More evidence of her double life. More lies I hadn't detected. I photographed everything before returning it exactly as I'd found it. The deception cut deep, but each piece of evidence strengthened my resolve. My next step was more difficult. Finding Rebecca Taylor. Jack had provided her full name and address, but contacting another man's wife to tell her about her husband's affair seemed daunting. How do you start that conversation? Hello, I'm Jonathan Mitchell, and our spouses are sleeping together. After careful consideration, I drafted an email. Direct, compassionate, and with an offer to provide evidence if she wanted it. I didn't send it yet. That would come after confronting Sophia, but having it prepared gave me a sense of control. Thomas checked in daily, offering support and a listening ear. How are you holding up? He asked during our regular phone call. I'm functioning, I replied. Some moments are clearer than others. Sometimes I look at her and wonder if I ever really knew her at all. That's normal, he assured me. The person you thought you married and the person who could do this, they can't be the same person. Meanwhile, Jack continued his surveillance, providing daily updates. The pattern never varied. Nicholas and Sophia meeting regularly, exchanging intimate gestures, completely unconcerned about being caught. The boldness of their affair suggested either carelessness or the belief that they were untouchable. By Friday, I had everything in place. Financial records secured, legal consultation completed, evidence organized. I even booked a hotel room for myself, anticipating I wouldn't want to stay in our house after the confrontation. The final piece came from Jack on Saturday morning. I've confirmed they're meeting at his apartment today at noon. Mrs. Taylor is taking their daughter to visit her parents in Connecticut for the weekend. They'll likely be together until evening. This was it, the opportunity I've been waiting for. With both of them together, I could confront them simultaneously. No chance for them to coordinate stories or warn each other. I texted Sophia casually. Hey, picking up lunch at that deli you like near Beacon Hill. Want anything? Her response came quickly. No thanks. Having lunch with Sarah today. See you tonight. Sarah. Another lie. Another fictional event in the elaborate story she'd constructed. I drove to Nicholas's Back Bay apartment building, my heart pounding, but my mind surprisingly clear. Jack had provided the unit number and even the entry code for the building's front door. Are you sure you want to do this alone? Thomas had asked when I told him my plan. I can come with you. I need to do this myself, I'd replied. But thank you. Standing outside the building now, I took a deep breath. In my pocket was my phone with all the evidence. In my mind was every question I needed answered. And in my heart was the certainty that whatever happened next, my life would never be the same. I punched in the entry code and walked in. The security guard barely glanced at me as I walked through the lobby. Inside the elevator, I took deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. When I reached Nicholas's floor, I moved on autopilot, finding apartment 7B at the end of a long hallway. I stood outside the door for a moment, listening. I could hear faint music playing inside, the low murmur of voices, laughter. I knocked firmly, 3 times. The laughter stopped. Footsteps approached. The door swung open, and Nicholas Taylor stood there in jeans and an unbuttoned shirt, his expression shifting from relaxed to shocked in an instant. Jonathan, he stammered, immediately trying to block my view inside. What are you? Who is it, Nick? Sophia's voice called from within the apartment. Then she appeared behind him, wearing only his dress shirt. Her face drained of color when she saw me. Oh my God, can I come in? I asked calmly, surprised by my own composure. I think the 3 of us need to talk. Nicholas looked like he might try to shut the door, but Sophia placed a hand on his arm. "Let him in," she said quietly. The apartment was modern and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. In another context, I might have admired the view. Now, I barely noticed it. "How'd you find us?" Sophia asked, her arms wrapped around herself defensively. I pulled out my phone, opened the gallery of photos Jack had compiled, and placed it on the coffee table between us. "I've known for weeks," I said. "I have everything. Dates, times, locations. Every lie you've told me for the past 6 months." Nicholas paled as he glanced at the photos. "Look, Jonathan, I know this looks bad." "Bad?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "You're sleeping with my wife. You're cheating on your wife. Rebecca, right? The mother of your 3-year-old daughter." He flinched at their names, confirming what I already knew. "Jonathan, please," Sophia began, tears forming in her eyes. "This isn't what you think. Nick and I, we didn't plan for this to happen. We have a connection that—" "Save it." I cut her off. "I didn't come here for excuses or to hear about your connection. I came to tell you that I know everything, and to give you a choice." I pulled out the folder Alan had prepared for me. "These are divorce papers. You can sign them, and we can handle this quietly, privately. Or you can fight it, and then I'll be forced to send all of this evidence to your company's HR department. I believe they have a strict policy about supervisors dating subordinates, don't they?" Nicholas stiffened. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said, turning to him. "And Rebecca will receive her own copy of everything I have, unless you both agree to my terms." "What terms?" Sophia asked, her voice small. "A clean break. No dragging this out in court. No fighting over assets. You sign, we divide things according to these terms, and we move on with our lives." Sophia glanced at Nicholas, then back at me. "You've thought this all through." "I've had time," I replied. "Time you gave me by lying to my face day after day." For a moment, the apartment was completely silent. Sophia stared at the divorce papers, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Nicholas paced behind her, running his hands through his hair. "This is blackmail," he finally said. "No," I corrected him. "This is a reasonable settlement offer with the understanding that discretion works in everyone's favor. You're both free to refuse." Sophia picked up the papers, flipping through them. "You're not asking for alimony, even though you'd probably get it." "I don't want your money," I said. "I just want this to be over." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face now. "I never meant to hurt you, Jonathan. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Then how was it supposed to be?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Were you going to leave me? Were you going to leave Rebecca?" I looked at Nicholas. "Or were you both just going to keep lying indefinitely?" Neither answered. They didn't have to. The truth was obvious. They had been perfectly content with their arrangement, enjoying the excitement of their affair while maintaining the security of their marriages. "I need time to think," Sophia said. "To talk to a lawyer." "You have 48 hours, I replied. "After that, I'll assume you're declining my offer." Nicholas stepped forward. "Look, Jonathan, I understand you're angry. You don't understand anything about what I'm feeling." I cut him off. "And frankly, I don't care what either of you does anymore. Sign the papers or don't. Just know that your actions have consequences, and the time has come to face them." I stood up to leave, feeling strangely calm. In the doorway, I turned back once. "By the way, happy anniversary, Sophia. I had planned a surprise for you that night, the night I saw you two at the Charles Hotel. I hired a chef to recreate our first date. I had musicians waiting. I've been planning it for months." The color drained from her face. "That's how I found out," I continued. "I was waiting for you at home with this perfect evening planned, and you were with him." As I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "How did it go?" I took a deep breath of the crisp fall air. "It's done. Meeting you at the hotel. I could use a drink." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. Not happiness. That would come later. But the unbearable weight of deception had been lifted. I had taken back control of my life. Thomas was waiting at the hotel bar when I arrived, 2 whiskeys already on the table. "You look different," he observed as I sat down. "I feel different," I admitted, taking a long sip. The alcohol burned pleasantly down my throat, like I finally took control of something that's been controlling me. We talked for hours, dissecting every moment of the confrontation. Thomas listened without judgment, offering the steady friendship that had kept me sane through this ordeal. "What do you think they'll do?" he asked finally. "They'll sign," I said with certainty. "Sophia won't risk her career, and Nicholas won't risk his marriage. They're both too invested in their public images." I was right. Exactly 46 hours later, my lawyer called to inform me that Sophia had signed the divorce papers and agreed to all terms. The settlement was fair. We split our major assets, kept our own retirement accounts, and agreed to sell the house and divide the proceeds. No alimony, no drawn-out court battle, just a clean, surgical end to 11 years together. My next decision was harder. With the divorce proceedings underway, I had to decide about Rebecca Taylor. Did she deserve to know the truth about her husband? After much consideration, I sent the email I had drafted earlier, providing her with my contact information if she wanted evidence or details. 3 days later, she called. Her voice was steady, controlled, but I could hear the pain underneath. "I suspected something," she said. "There were signs. I just didn't want to see them." "I understand," I replied. "I was the same way. Did you send these photos to hurt him? To get revenge?" There was no accusation in her question, just genuine curiosity. "No," I answered honestly. "I sent them because if someone had known about my wife's affair and hadn't told me, I would have felt betrayed twice. You deserve the choice of what to do with the information." "Thank you," she said quietly, "for respecting me enough to give me that choice." We spoke for almost an hour, two strangers connected by the worst kind of shared experience. I never asked what she planned to do about Nicholas. That was her decision, just as mine had been to end things with Sophia. The weeks that followed were a blur of practical matters: finding a new apartment, dividing possessions, informing friends and family about her separation. Sophia attempted to talk to me several times, offering explanations and apologies that felt hollow and self-serving. I remained cordial but distant. The time for conversation had passed. Surprisingly, the pain I'd expected to overwhelm me never fully materialized. There was sadness, certainly, for the future we'd planned that would never come to be. But there was also relief, the relief of no longer living a lie, of no longer loving someone who didn't deserve that love. "You're handling this better than I expected," Thomas remarked during one of our regular dinners. "Better than most people would." I considered his words. "I think it's because I mourned my marriage while I was still in it. By the time I confronted Sophia, I had already accepted that the relationship I thought I had never really existed." 1 year after discovering Sophia's affair, I stood on the deck of my new lakeside cabin, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. The property was smaller than our Boston house, further from the city, but entirely mine. A place with no memories of betrayal, no echoes of lies. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier with surprising efficiency. Sophia had never contested any of the terms, perhaps understanding it was the least painful path forward for everyone involved. We had spoken only through lawyers since that day in Nicholas's apartment, a deliberate distance that allowed wounds to begin healing. I had learned, through mutual friends, that Nicholas and Rebecca had separated shortly after my revelation. Whether they had divorced, I didn't know, nor did I particularly care. Sophia and Nicholas were apparently still together, trying to build something permanent from the wreckage of 2 marriages. I wished them neither happiness nor misery. They had simply ceased to be relevant to my life. Thomas joined me on the deck, handing me a beer. He had been visiting for the weekend, helping me install new kitchen cabinets. His friendship had been my anchor through the darkest days. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, leaning against the railing. "Just reflecting," I replied. "A year ago, I thought my life was ending. Now it feels like it finally started." "You've come a long way," he nodded. "Not everyone handles that kind of betrayal with the grace you did." I considered his words. I don't think it was grace. More like survival instinct. I could have become bitter, could have devoted myself to revenge, but what would that have accomplished? I'd still be living in the shadow of what happened. The truth was, I had made a conscious decision not to let Sophia's betrayal define the rest of my life. The pain had been real, intense, but I refused to let it become my identity. I had channeled that energy into rebuilding my home, my routines, my sense of self. I had started dating again recently, cautiously. A woman named Claire, a landscape architect I'd met through a community gardening project. We were taking things slowly, both carrying baggage from previous relationships, both aware of the fragility of trust. But there was genuine connection there, a possibility I wouldn't have been open to 6 months ago. Do you ever miss her? Thomas asked after a comfortable silence. I miss who I thought she was, I answered honestly. I miss the future I had planned. But the real Sophia? The one who could lie to my face for months? No, I don't miss her at all. As darkness settled over the lake, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The betrayal had changed me, certainly. I was more cautious now, less trusting, more aware of the capacity for deception in even those closest to us. But I was also stronger, more self-reliant, clearer about what I wanted from life and relationships. I think, I said, watching the first stars appear, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we need to be. Thomas raised his bottle in a toast. To unexpected discoveries. I clinked my bottle against his. And new beginnings.